Is Russia planning secret military missions with Africa? Russia has promised to provide increased military support to Africa, which is causing concern for the United States. The U.S. is worried about how Russia's growing military presence in Africa will impact its strategic interests. This development could potentially lead to a further deterioration in U.S.-Russia relations. However, the nature of these secret missions remains unknown. Let's find out. Russia has pledged increased support to Burkina Faso in its ongoing battle against militant groups. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has announced a substantial boost in Russian military instructors and equipment to the West African nation. This commitment highlights Russia's intent to bolster its presence and influence in a region plagued by insurgency and instability. The enhancement of military support comes as Burkina Faso continues to grapple with extremist violence. The additional Russian aid is expected to reinforce the local government's efforts to stabilize the country and combat extremism more effectively. All this was said in Lavrov's visit to Africa. So was it all planned or CME out as a surprise? How important was this visit? Sergei Lavrov's recent visit to Burkina Faso is a critical component of a broader diplomatic mission that spans several West African countries, including Guinea and the Republic of Congo. This tour is not merely a series of high-level meetings. It represents a strategic action by Russia to solidify its influence in a region that is increasingly pivotal in global geopolitics. The background to this visit is complex, intertwined with Russia's broader international agenda, particularly its ongoing conflict with Ukraine and the resultant geopolitical ramifications. The timing and choice of destinations for Lavrov's tour are particularly telling. As Russia faces escalating sanctions and diplomatic isolation from Western countries due to its invasion of Ukraine, it is actively seeking to cultivate new alliances and bolster existing ones in other parts of the world. Africa, with its rich resources and strategic geopolitical position, has emerged as a key area of focus for Russian foreign policy. Lavrov's engagements in West Africa are an example of this renewed emphasis on the continent. Historically, Russia's involvement in Africa has ebbed and flowed, often influenced by the larger currents of Cold War dynamics and post-Cold War realignments. In recent years, however, there has been a noticeable resurgence of Russian interest in Africa. This is driven by several factors, including economic interests, geopolitical strategy, and the desire to counterbalance Western influence. The visit to Burkina Faso, therefore, must be viewed within this larger context of Russia's strategic recalibration. The security situation has been exacerbated by internal political turmoil, marked by 2 coups within a span of 10 months. These coups have significantly altered Burkina Faso's political landscape, leading to the expulsion of French military forces, which had been a cornerstone of the country's security apparatus. The expulsion of French forces marked a pivotal shift in Burkina Faso's foreign policy and security strategy. Historically, France has maintained a strong military and political presence in its former colonies in West Africa, often positioning itself as a key security partner. However, growing anti-French sentiment, fueled by perceived neo-colonial attitudes and failures to effectively address security concerns, has led to a re-evaluation of these relationships. Burkina Faso's decision to pivot towards Russia for military support is emblematic of this broader regional trend. Lavrov's visit to Burkina Faso, therefore, serves multiple strategic purposes. Firstly, it is an opportunity to deepen bilateral relations and solidify Russia's role as a key security partner. The announcement of increased Russian military instructors and equipment underscores this commitment. By providing tangible support, Russia is positioning itself as a reliable ally in Burkina Faso's fight against extremism and insurgency. This not only enhances Russia's influence in the country, but also serves as a broader signal to other African nations considering similar realignments. Secondly, the visit is part of a broader narrative of Russian resurgence on the global stage. As Western countries impose sanctions and diplomatic pressures on Russia, the Kremlin is actively seeking to demonstrate that it is not isolated and still has significant global reach. Engaging with African nations, which often have complex and varied relationships with Western powers, allows Russia to showcase its global diplomatic clout. This is particularly important in the context of the United Nations and other international forums, where African votes and support can be crucial. Thirdly, Lavrov's tour highlights the economic dimensions of Russia's engagement with Africa. While the focus of the visit to Burkina Faso is predominantly on security, the broader tour encompasses economic and trade discussions as well. Africa's vast natural resources, including minerals and energy reserves, are of significant interest to Russia. Strengthening ties with African nations, therefore, is also about securing access to these resources and fostering economic partnerships that can offset the impact of Western sanctions. The geopolitical implications of Lavrov's visit extend beyond Burkina Faso. By engaging with multiple countries in West Africa, Russia is effectively building a network of alliances that can serve as a counterbalance to Western influence in the region. This is particularly relevant in the context of the Sahel, a region plagued by instability and extremism. As Western countries, including France and the United States, reassess their military and political strategies in the Sahel, Russia's proactive engagement presents an alternative model of partnership. Furthermore, Lavrov's visit must be seen in the light of broader international dynamics. The Global South, encompassing Africa, Asia, and Latin America, is increasingly becoming a battleground for influence between major powers. China's Belt and Road Initiative, for instance, has made significant inroads in Africa, providing infrastructure and investment in exchange for strategic partnerships. Russia's activities, while different in scope and scale, are part of a similar effort to secure influence and forge alliances in a multipolar world order. Considering Burkina Faso's security and political conditions, does Burkina Faso really need Russia's help? Burkina Faso, a landlocked country in West Africa, has been ensnared in a web of violence and instability that has severely compromised its security and political landscape. This ongoing turmoil has its roots in a mix of internal and external factors, which have collectively plunged the country into a state of persistent conflict and uncertainty. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. One of the most pressing issues facing Burkina Faso is the relentless violence perpetrated by extremist groups. Over the past decade, the country has become a battleground for militant factions. These groups have exploited regional vulnerabilities, including porous borders, weak governance, and socio-economic grievances, to establish a foothold in Burkina Faso and its neighboring countries. The militant insurgency began gaining significant momentum around 2015, with attacks becoming more frequent and sophisticated. These militant groups employ tactics such as bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings to instill fear and exert control over vast swathes of territory. Their operations have resulted in thousands of deaths and displaced millions, creating a humanitarian crisis of unprecedented proportions. The northern and eastern regions of Burkina Faso have been particularly hard hit, with entire communities forced to flee their homes. The government's response has often been hampered by limited resources and a lack of effective coordination among security forces. Despite international support, including from France and other Western nations, the violence has continued unabated, highlighting the complex and entrenched nature of the insurgency. And what about the political instability? The security crisis has been compounded by significant political instability. Burkina Faso has experienced 2 coups within a span of 10 months, a stark indication of the fragile state of its political institutions. The first coup occurred in January 2022, when soldiers ousted President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, citing his inability to effectively combat the insurgency. The military junta, led by Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, promised to restore security and address the grievances that had fueled the unrest. However, Damiba's tenure was short-lived. In September 2022, he was himself ousted in a second coup, led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré. This rapid succession of coups has destabilized the political landscape, eroding public trust in the government and further complicating efforts to establish stability. Each change in leadership has brought shifts in policy and alliances, creating an environment of uncertainty and volatility. In the wake of the coup, Burkina Faso expelled French forces, signaling a pivot away from its traditional security partners. As we discussed earlier, the shift towards Russian support has been a notable development in Burkina Faso's ongoing struggle against extremism. Sergei Lavrov's recent visit to the country underscored this burgeoning partnership. During his visit, Lavrov announced an increase in Russian military instructors and equipment, a significant boost to Burkina Faso's security apparatus. This partnership with Russia is part of a broader trend of African nations seeking to diversify their international alliances. Russia, for its part, has been actively courting African nations, offering military assistance, economic investments, and political support as part of its strategy to expand its global influence. The increased Russian presence in Burkina Faso is emblematic of this wider geopolitical strategy. The introduction of Russian support is expected to bolster Burkina Faso's efforts to combat the insurgency. Do the reasons justify Russia's presence? When Burkina Faso wants to end reliance on the West, why is it shifting toward Russia? Why not be independent? The combination of extremist violence and political instability has precipitated a dire humanitarian crisis in Burkina Faso. The relentless conflict has displaced over 2 million people, many of whom are living in precarious conditions with limited access to basic necessities such as food, water, and healthcare. The majority of the displaced are children, who face severe risks of malnutrition, disease, and exploitation. The Norwegian Refugee Council has highlighted Burkina Faso as one of the world's most neglected crises, emphasizing the urgent need for international assistance. In 2024, it is estimated that 6.3 million people will require humanitarian aid. Despite these staggering figures, the response from the international community has been insufficient, with significant gaps in funding and resources. The trauma experienced by the displaced population is profound. Many have witnessed or endured acts of violence, leading to widespread psychological distress. The lack of adequate mental health services exacerbates this situation, leaving countless individuals without the support they need to cope with their experiences. Humanitarian organizations on the ground are struggling to address these needs, hampered by security constraints and limited funding. As Burkina Faso navigates this complex landscape of security threats and political upheaval, the path forward remains fraught with challenges. The government's ability to effectively combat extremism is crucial, but so too is the need to restore political stability and public confidence in state institutions. The shift towards Russian support reflects a pragmatic response to immediate security needs, but it also underscores the broader realignment of international alliances taking place in the region. For Burkina Faso, the immediate priority is to stabilize the security situation and address the humanitarian crisis. This requires not only military efforts, but also comprehensive strategies that address the root causes of the insurgency, including poverty, unemployment, and social exclusion. Strengthening governance and rebuilding trust in political institutions are essential steps towards sustainable peace. The international community also has a critical role to play. Increased humanitarian aid, support for development initiatives, and diplomatic engagement are vital to help Burkina Faso overcome its current challenges. As the country seeks to navigate its way out of this crisis, a coordinated and sustained effort from both domestic and international actors is essential to lay the foundation for a more stable and prosperous future. How has the West responded to this? As Burkina Faso grapples with severe security challenges and a humanitarian crisis, the international response has been marked by a noticeable disengagement from Western governments and increasing criticism of Russian involvement in the region. For the United States, the strategic focus has been shifting towards countering major global powers like China and Russia, as well as addressing domestic concerns. This realignment has led to a reduction in resources and attention dedicated to the Sahel, despite the ongoing security challenges in the region. The withdrawal from Afghanistan and the pivot towards the Indo-Pacific region are indicative of this broader strategic reprioritization. Economic pressures exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and other global economic challenges have led Western countries to reevaluate their foreign aid budgets. This has resulted in reduced financial assistance to countries like Burkina Faso, which are heavily reliant on external support to manage their crises. The reduction in aid has directly impacted the ability of humanitarian organizations to respond effectively to the needs of displaced and vulnerable populations. As Western influence wanes, Russia has stepped in to fill the void, offering military and strategic support to Burkina Faso. This shift has been met with mixed reactions and significant criticism. particularly from Western governments and international observers. Will in the upcoming years, Russia will completely replace the West in Africa? Russia has strategically leveraged its diplomatic engagements and military support to build robust alliances across Africa. High-profile visits by Russian officials, such as Sergei Lavrov's recent tour of West Africa, underscore Russia's commitment to deepening its ties with the continent. By offering military instructors, equipment, and training, Russia provides tangible support that many African nations value, particularly those grappling with security challenges like Burkina Faso. This military assistance not only addresses immediate security needs, but also fosters long-term partnerships that could gradually diminish the reliance on Western military aid. Africa's vast natural resources are a significant draw for Russia. Through investments in mining, energy, and infrastructure, Russia is securing access to critical resources while also contributing to the economic development of African nations. Projects such as joint ventures in oil and gas exploration or the development of mineral extraction facilities highlight Russia's willingness to invest in the continent's future. These economic ties are mutually beneficial, promoting growth and stability in Africa, while providing Russia with essential resources and new markets. One of Russia's appealing aspects to African countries is its policy of non-interference in domestic affairs. Unlike some Western powers that often condition their support on political reforms or human rights improvements, Russia tends to focus on pragmatic cooperation without imposing such conditions. This approach resonates with many African leaders who prefer partnerships that respect their sovereignty and political choices. As a result, Russia's political support can be a stabilizing factor, particularly in countries experiencing internal conflict or political instability. Russia's engagement in Africa is not limited to military and economic spheres. Technological and educational cooperation are also vital components of its strategy. Russia offers scholarships to African students, invests in educational programs, and promotes technological transfers that can enhance local capacities. These initiatives help build a foundation for sustained collaboration and development, fostering goodwill and long-term partnerships. The global geopolitical landscape is shifting towards multipolarity, with emerging powers like Russia and China playing more prominent roles. This shift creates opportunities for African countries to diversify their international partnerships beyond traditional Western alliances. As Western influence in some regions wanes due to economic pressures, strategic realignments, or domestic priorities, Russia is well positioned to fill the gap. By proactively engaging with African nations, Russia is asserting itself as a key player in this new multipolar world order. It is likely that Western involvement in Africa will completely vanish, giving way to a significant transformation in the geopolitical landscape. As Western influence wanes, Russia's growing presence is poised to significantly alter the balance of power across the continent. This shift could herald a new era of cooperation and development, with Russia playing a central role in shaping Africa's future. Russia's expanding influence will bring about profound changes in the economic, political, and military spheres. Economically, Russia could forge new trade agreements, invest in infrastructure projects, and exploit natural resources, thereby boosting African economies and fostering mutual growth. Politically, Russia's engagement might lead to stronger diplomatic ties, with African nations gaining a powerful ally on the global stage. This could result in increased political stability and new avenues for addressing regional conflicts and governance challenges. Militarily, Russia's presence could reshape security dynamics, providing support in the form of training, arms supplies, and counterterrorism assistance. This might enhance the capabilities of African nations to handle internal and external threats, contributing to a more secure and stable continent. Furthermore, Russia's involvement could promote a multipolar world order, reducing Africa's dependency on Western powers and enabling a more balanced global power structure. This diversification of alliances and partnerships could spur innovation, drive sustainable development, and encourage a more inclusive approach to addressing global challenges such as climate change, health crises, and economic inequality. Will there be secret missions as well that the West should be scared of? It is conceivable that alongside overt diplomatic, economic, and military engagements, there may be covert operations or secret missions that Russia and its African allies could undertake to undermine Western dominance on the continent. Russia could increase its intelligence-gathering efforts in Africa, collaborating with local governments to monitor Western activities and counteract Western influence. These operations might include cyber espionage, surveillance, and infiltration of Western networks operating in Africa. In some regions, Russia might secretly support insurgent groups or opposition movements that align with its interests, aiming to destabilize governments that are closely allied with Western powers. This could involve providing arms, training, and financial support. Covert economic actions, such as undermining Western businesses or disrupting supply chains critical to Western economies, could be part of the strategy. Cyber attacks on infrastructure, hacking into financial systems, and other forms of economic warfare might be employed. Behind closed doors, Russia might broker secret agreements with African nations, promising military support, resource sharing, or economic aid in exchange for political loyalty and opposition to Western policies. These alliances could remain undisclosed to the public, creating a network of influence that is not immediately visible. To sway public opinion and create distrust in Western institutions, Russia might engage in sophisticated propaganda and disinformation campaigns. This could involve spreading fake news, using social media to influence public sentiment, and undermining confidence in Western-backed initiatives. The West is likely aware of these potential strategies and is closely monitoring Russia's activities in Africa. Western nations might respond by increasing their own covert operations, bolstering support for allied governments, and enhancing their intelligence capabilities to counter Russian influence. Do you think Russia and Africa's new focus on military relations will bring good results? What would happen if they intensified it? Let us know in the comment section. Why is Russia so willing to have military ties with Africa? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.